Hey everybody, this is Jason with Dad's Guide to the Galaxy, and today we're going to be talking about the whole Titan submarine situation that's been all over the news. It's just absolutely crazy. For those of you who haven't been following along, essentially a submarine that is owned by OceanGate is or was launched to visit the site of the Titanic, which is about a 400-mile journey. And of course, the depth at which this submarine has to travel is quite extensive. But basically, they've been searching for the submarine ever since it lost contact a few hours after it was launched. And so, the Coast Guard, Navy, and many municipality and authorities are trying to identify and locate where this submarine could be. And one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting is there's a lot of um, information being passed around and a lot of opinion and speculation on, you know, what should be happening and whatnot. So the reason I think that this story broke originally is due to the high profile individuals that were currently on the submarine. Now, obviously, there, I believe, were five passengers in total. Um, Two of the passengers were one, including the CEO of the company itself, and again, the company's name was OceanGate, as well as a English billionaire. And the first time I heard about this story was when I was advised that a billionaire had gone missing. Now, of course, submarine dives are dangerous in themselves, and especially with a lot of the regulations that are available to help make sure that their safety is number one priority, because what we find in an airplane and what we find under the water are two different types of pressure. And I think that most people don't really understand the full capacity of what being underwater in a tight space really means. By no means have I ever been in a submarine other than maybe at the Disneyland theme park. But at the same time, just being underwater in a swimming pool or maybe diving on the beach, you tend to have a level of anxiety just with the option of holding your breath. And with this particular instance, these five individuals were in a small enclosed space that was locked from the outside, and that locked aspect of it prevented them from being able to get in. Now, it's funny because a lot of the information and a lot of skits are showing, hey, this was predicted by Pepper Pig, and it was also predicted on South Park or whatnot. Obviously, everything is easier to sink and it's much harder to get back up. But there are a lot of safety precautions that you can put into place where, some of this comes into play, and, some of it is pretty straightforward and simple. So, for example, I think one of the funniest things that I saw out there was, they were using a Logitech controller to essentially um, keep the whole ship and movement controlled. And you know, honestly, I think that there has to be a level of technology that is used. There has to be an encompassment of technology, and I get that they're using a new fiber material. I haven't done too much looking into it myself, but anytime you're working with measurements of pressure, you want to make sure that you are as careful as you possibly can, not only with just what you're putting underwater, but also the amount of pressure to the seals and anything for joints, bolts, whatnot. Um, the individual that was the CEO, I believe, was Stockton Rush. I think it was his name. One of these individuals who has basically tried to see every and any adventure that you possibly could. But again, you know, how much can you push that? I get you want to seek out thrill, but there's only so much that you can protect yourself from if you're not protecting yourself against everything. And being that they were in international waters, a lot of the other additional speculation is that the regulatory standards that they would need in order to keep themselves safe while international waters weren't as stringent as they needed to be, or weren't as strict as they needed to be, or weren't followed. Really, basically, what it boils down to. The other individual, the billionaire, is I think his name was Hamish Harding. I think it was. Um, he made most of his money in air airplane sales. I guess was the gist of it. You know, I think if you're paying $250,000 per person to do this dive, one, I want to make sure that if I'm paying it, I'm getting back up. Because what's the point of having an adventure and going through something if you're not going to be able to recount the story and tell somebody about it? But two, I want to make sure that it's safe and that I'm not worrying about anything that I normally would deal with. So, like I said, for me, I think I would have a high level of anxiety being locked in a boat, and you've got a 8 hour trip essentially. Um, I know many people get anxiety just by being in their work desk for 8 hours, let alone the trip to that work desk. So you've got to anticipate that there's probably a level of anxiety there. Um, there's been quite a few individuals on the television lately that they've interviewed to discuss all of this. But part of you also has to wonder, well, was it something really that was faulted? Another individual was a Paul Henry Nagelet, I think is how I pronounce his name. Um, excuse me, not really sure what or who he is. I didn't have really a chance to look it up. I just found it interesting because, again, everybody wants to chip in and put in their 2 cents about why this wasn't safe or why this wasn't something that they would do. And all in all, I think that somewhat took away from the focus of possibly finding these individuals. Um, they did have a certain amount of oxygen, but from recent discoveries, they actually found debris. And apparently, they found the front end and the back end of the capsule that they were diving in, but none of the bodies. So they think some type of implosion happened, and the pressure in the ocean was too great for the dive itself. It just caused it to collapse. Now, mind you, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Hamish Harding or John Stockton or Stockton Rush, one of those individuals actually went all the way down to the Mariana Trench. So, and that was in a different submarine um, that had a higher regulation. I believe it was also a different material, a steel material, opposed to a fiber material that they're using for this particular trip. And from my understanding, that they also had other previous trips that were successful. So, with that being said, even though it's few and far between, there's still a possibility where something could go wrong. And in this case, it looks like that's exactly what happened. Obviously, your thoughts and your prayers go out to the family and the individuals. Um, but the other piece is, you know, you can't help to think maybe there's something else going on. I mean, there was a Schulman Daywood and a Shahzada Daywood who were also on the the Titanic expedition for this OceanGate Titan trip down. And, they were part of the five that lost their lives, including the captain of the vessel. But I think the captain of the vessel was Stockton Rush, the CEO. So, knowing you have two individuals who are absolutely high profile, you have two other groups, would appear to be family members, and then an individual on the side, all willing and able to pay a high price for a trip down, a company in a phase of testing and experimentation with new technology, that there's bound to be something that normally could go wrong. But then there's also the little seed in the back of your head that, what if something else happened? What if the way the dive was set up, something else was nicked or sabotaged? And, you have this expedition and this unfortunate incident that took the lives of so many people. Um, it makes you wonder. I mean, there's always a possibility that something could or would be. And I know everyone, focuses on, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, don't plant that seed. And in some cases, you have to look at it like this. If you take a situation, however improbable, if it's the only situation left out of removing everything else from the equation, then there's a high possibility that that could be the case. In this instance, being that the vessel had taken other trips, we don't know what the regulations were for them to review, whether or not there were nicks and dents and other things in the actual vessel. We don't know how the seals were tested or verified with or after each trip or however many trips they had successfully had before this. We don't know how or what the operation functionality was for any of the electrical equipment. Was it properly insulated? Was it sealed and secured? We do know a few things that apparently have been left out there as questions where we haven't received a response back from OceanGate just as of yet. So the first thing that they speculated on was that there was no beacon for them to hear and identify, um, to locate where this vessel went down. But they were able to identify possible sounds and banging based on sonar. Well, if they're speculating that within 2 hours of them, you know, going into this mission on Sunday, that the implosion happened, there really would have been no option for them banging at that point because more than likely any implosion in the vessel would have caused immediate demise of everybody on board. And so you kind of have to question, was this something that they were saying that they heard? Did they actually hear it? Um, there's a lot to question about that. And it's very possible that, you hear other sounds from either the Titanic vessel itself that are reverberating through the water, or, you could have something from the debris as it's moving around where it's not really like a bang, but more of a knock when, something is moved. Not a lot of current, not a lot of movement on the bottom there where they're at anyways. So it would make you question whether or not there was truthfulness to the actual knocking and what they were hearing. Safe to bet it probably wasn't them if that timeline, you know, plays out to be the case. One other thing that I think is really important with this is, with new technology and the ability to dive and move, not putting in a way to rectify a sinking situation in the ocean, creating a way for you to get back up after you have been dropped down, I think is really important. And I know for the few vessels that I saw and the few pictures that I saw of the vessel itself, there appeared to be a cord that was tying to the back of the vessel as it descended. My only question is how do they navigate as they descend? Because in one of the interviews that they had spoken of, they used a reference stating that an earlier conversation with Stockton revealed that some of the things that they could run into that could be problematic would be like, for example, hitting a net or possibly a cliffside or something like that. Well, how do you navigate and move out of that if there were no navigational components for it to move around? I'm thinking there had to be some kind of propulsion system, even if it's in its basic form, to give them a descented direction. Um, I know on the picture it's somewhat limited, and I know they show a lot of these images and video of a larger component being dropped down, but I'd have to safely guess that more than likely the front part of the vessels where they had this limited propulsion system. But how do you get air back into the vessel once the air's been let out? And I'm guessing at this point, maybe it wasn't an implosion in a sense where pressure was too great. Maybe it was an implosion where too much air was let out, and it caused a failure in one of the systems. So there's that. Um, I was listening to a couple of individuals, and I forget the guy's name from Expedition Unknown, But he was talking about how he was actually invited and had some pictures of him with Stockton and a few others. But he decided that he was going to pass at the opportunity of going on an expedition inside his vessel down to the Titanic. And my understanding was that the trip was successful for a few other individuals that did go, even though there's been a lot of setbacks depending on weather and other conditions, which has resulted in some lawsuits for the company that I don't think anybody's commented on. I don't think anybody will. But at the same time, it's like, well, are you putting that out there to get your 2 cents in? Are you putting this out there to get your visibility? What relevance do you have? And really, my question would be, who are the direct competitors for OceanGate? I mean, who's working towards advancing in exploration or technology in oceanic research or navigation in such a degree that they would consider OceanGate as their competitor? And so I've been doing a little bit of research on that. Haven't really found much yet, but I'm sure it's out there. I know there was some comment on, I think it was CNN during one of the conferences that Tesla, as well as, um, oh, what's his face? Um, the other guy. Oh my goodness, I can't remember his name. I'll come back to him. Um, but the two of them had their own companies. They were both going to space. So, and for whatever reason, I'm drawing a blank on his name. But they also were looking at and had companies that dealt with the technologies and the services to explore underwater regions. Well, if you have somebody who's out in the front who's not willing to, not scared of taking chances, and you are governed by something being more visible, I think that can slow you down and hurt how competition is set up for you. I think with especially like Elon Musk lately and him being in the news with everything and him taking on additional responsibilities in social media that he has, that there's an aspect of visibility he doesn't want the world to see. And if he's cutting corners, definitely going to see some comments and social media and posts to say, okay, well, hey, you think this could be a good idea, and you don't want to put that visibility out there. So I think that with most of this, whole situation and really tragedy, that there is always a possibility that something sinister could be lurking on the back end of this or in the background. You never know. I mean, obviously, you're taking out some competition from somebody who is dealing with a number of high level, high profile companies and making in the billions, and you're taking out competition from that. Um, Somebody who's as fluent and understanding with a lot of the processes. I mean, obviously, the billionaire, I think his name was Hamish. Um, if I'm not mistaken, I read right. He actually has a stepson and his wife. So I think that, obviously there's someone to take on the reins, but if that person is too young or untrained or unaware of what that business is or how to handle those business ventures, then you're kind of blowing into something, blindly and stumbling around. So, it changes your perspective and kind of how you see things. I uh, I know that they'll probably be talking about this for a while, but the one crazy piece about this, and this is where a lot of people get upset with the news, is this isn't the only headline out there that obviously requires attention. It's tragic, and yes, there are a few individuals that are impacted by this. But what happens is when you have a high profile story like this one, and when it hits the press, you lose focus on some of the other political matters that are out there, some of the other, local news matters, um, and a lot of things tend to fall to the wayside. I know this and the focus for Biden calling China's president a dictator out loud. I mean, everyone knows he is. I mean, that's why everyone makes fun of him, and That's why there's a lot of references to him looking like Winnie the Pooh and him dictating whether or not Disney can do what they can do there, because he's exactly that. He's absolutely a dictator. But when it comes to other parts of that news, I want to know what's happening with investigations that are being found. I want to know what the truth is behind current events. There's only so much you can cover in a story like this, and I think for the last 5 to 6 days, they have done an amazing job of making sure that this is the only thing discussed. And when you do that, you lose priority over these other topics. So, just something for food for thought. I don't know. It's just it's amazing and shocking to me. I see it and I take it for face value, but part of you has to wonder what else is going on. And I know with a lot of the conversations that we'll have, and I know some of the conversations in the future. This is just something that I wanted to get off my chest and put out there, because I think it's concerning. I mean, there's a couple of different things that are happening, and you want to make sure that the family's protected and they're safe, and you want to make sure the individuals are focused on being rescued, but at the same time, you don't know if everyone's intentions are necessarily there. And so I'm hoping in this instance that everybody involved was, up to the responsibilities and making sure these individuals were safe. But I think at the same time that, there's an air of caution when it comes to what could be happening on the back end to what caused this. So I'm hoping that they do find all the debris, and I do hope that they have a proper investigation, and that investigation is done by an outside party, non-partial to the company or any of its partners, and really get down to the nitty gritty and find out if this was, simply just an accident and faulty equipment, or if this was something else. So stay tuned next time for next video, next conversation, where we might talk about something else, but we try to get a conversation about everything and anything that's out there, and we look forward to seeing you guys join us next time. Thank you.